On the agenda tonight, we're going back to 1968. We're going to be taking a look at Taj Mahal, and he's going to be performing Everybody's Got to Change Sometime. Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus, and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. So let's get Taj up on screen. This is only just under 3 minutes in length, so we'll watch it the whole way through, and as an added bonus, we get to see some late 60s dancing in action. Let's get into this.
And there's a change in the ocean, change in the deep blue sea. Well, there's a change in my baby, but they ain't never know. Changing me, everybody. Ooh, you know they ought to change sometime. Cause if they don't make the change, baby, they're gonna wind up in a lonesome ground. You know I change my shirts, change my money, change my woman just to keep from acting funny, everybody. And you know they ought to change sometime. Cause if they don't make that change, baby, they're gonna wind up in a lonesome ground. I changed my numbers on my door, so my baby can't find out where I live no more. Everybody, ooh, you know they ought to change sometime. You know if they don't make that change, baby, they're gonna wind up in the lonesome ground. If you can't get a wife, get a bill. Just a change in the mountain, baby. There's a change in the land. Ain't no change in me, baby, cause I'm a natural man, everybody. Ooh, you know they ought to change sometime. Well, if they don't change it, baby, mama, well, they're gonna wind up in a lonesome ground. Hey, you got to change the ocean, baby, change it. Deep blue sea, what is the change? Give me, baby, but they ain't never know. Change in me, everybody. You know they ought to change sometime. Cause if they don't make that changes, baby, they're gonna wind up in a lonesome ground. You got to change it. Ooh, you got to change it, baby. You got to change it, woman. You got to change it, baby. Cause if you don't make them changes, you're gonna wind up in the lonesome ground.
And there we have it, and you might have seen Taj playing the guitar in other videos, a multi-instrumentalist, but here, just putting a spotlight on his vocals, just carrying the whole song with that lead vocal. And it is something that I've said before about multi-instrumentalists who have great voices as well, and Taj is definitely one of those. It's a great example of a vocal performance that is leaning into chest voice, and it's in that register pretty much the whole time. He does flip up very occasionally into his head voice, but this is a belt. It is right at the top of that chest voice register, and he did have an album that was called Shouting in Key, and that was in 2000, and that won a Grammy. This is a great example of that register, and the way that he leans into the sound gets that rasp to his voice as well. It's also showing you how, when ascending in pitch and throughout that vocal range, you have to thin out the sound. So when Taj does hit those higher notes, it's regularly an ooh sound that he'll go to and then go back into that heavier sound of chest voice with the rasp. And you don't really want to be taking that amount of body up higher in your range, because that's when you'll start to strain and maybe the voice will unintentionally flip or crack because you're putting in so much effort to reach the higher notes. But here, Taj is belting at the top of his chest register, but then as soon as he wants to get a little bit higher than that and get a different sound stylistically, he'll go to that head voice and just give you an ooh vowel. The other thing we have with this performance is such a stripped back arrangement because we have just one guitar, bass, drums, and Taj's voice is very much under the spotlight because the playing on the guitar is minimal. We will break it down in a second, but there's nowhere to hide vocally. But the thing is about Taj's voice, it does fill in a lot of frequency because it's not a really clean note that he's hitting. He has that rasp, so it thickens out that vocal sound. So as soon as he does start singing, it just takes it to a totally different place and ups the level from what we've heard in the intro so far. You only have to imagine for a second this song sung in a cleaner tone and maybe without the chest voice and a little bit of head voice in there or falsetto. You can hear it straight away that it's not going to sound anywhere near what it should sound like if you go to a different part of your register. And Taj just has that voice in order to get the attitude and get the connection with the audience. Again, the groove that we've got throughout this whole performance gets people up on their feet, gets them dancing as well, and very enthusiastically. It's something about this kind of performance that when there's that energy in there, it does make you want to move because it is such a great execution of that original record that does have a little bit more rhythm work in there guitar-wise. So this is a stripped back performance when we look at the elements that are getting laid down on the fretboard. So we've got this basic blues progression in G. So we're starting on G, going to C, back to G, D, C, and back to G again. And the interesting thing about this, rhythm-wise, we've got this little bounce in there, but also the bass, the way that it just continues straight on with the... And you start to get the idea, but that's running the whole way through, and it means that you might hear more of the bass and assume that there's more guitar going on than that actually is. So the guitar is playing a riff the whole way through in the verse, but then when we get to the chorus, it's going to be exactly the same chords, but we have a little change up in the voicings just to keep it interesting, and it's something that does give a totally different sound to the verse from the chorus, so you know where you are in the song. So the other thing running through this is it sounds like a little bit of hybrid picking going on where we slide up and then do a pluck with the second finger on that high E string. You can do this with the pick on the G starting sliding and then doing a little upstroke, but by having the hybrid picking in there, you can start to put a little bit more attitude in that high E string, which sounds like it is being applied here and there throughout this performance. And this part, just being in G, we're sliding up and then fretting the high E string on the 3rd fret. So we're basically sliding into our major chord. If I was playing minor, my first finger will be playing the 3rd fret of the G string here in G minor, whereas if you hammer on your 2nd finger, it makes it into a major chord, and that's all that's happening, but we're sliding into that, and then you can hear that you're only hearing one note rather than the B string and the high E string, but you can bar those together and do a little bit more of a flick with that 2nd finger to get both of those strings in there, or if you are using the pick all together, then you can still get those two together, or the single with a pick. So it's just depending on how you're feeling at the time as to how you want it to sound. This is why it does change a little bit throughout this performance between hearing one and, but it's just something that changes here and there, and it's not a rehearsed thing, but just going with the feel of the song. So getting into the guitar and what's being played riff-wise, we aren't following the bass fully here. We're only playing half of what the bass is playing. The bass was going like that, whereas we're going, and then we're stopping there because we want to get in the rest of the riff. like that. And then we're shifting up to C, 8th fret. You want to slide on your G string with your second finger. And then do exactly the same technique there. And then back down to G. And now we're sliding all the way up to the 11th fret, second finger, to get into our D position. Same, back to G. So the only other part that we've got rhythm-wise is the chorus part, where we have this change in voicing and we're now just focusing on the top end of our chord, of our G. And we're just going to be shifting up, so we've gone from our G. Now I'm just going to be barring the high E, B and G with my first finger on the 5th fret. And then we're shifting up to, you can see here is a D chord. I think when he's playing it in the video, he's barring with his first finger and supplying that second finger in there. But if you just think of a D chord at the bottom of the guitar on your highest 3 strings, that's the shape that you want to get into. And then you want to move your way back down there again. You'll also find that if you are playing along with this, with these chord shapes, as we transition, you'll hear the slides between them as we do on this performance. So this, that little slide out, I do that slowly. You can just hear the finger moving up. It's not as evident on the way down, but certainly sliding up through those shapes. Just to go through those shapes as well, obviously the first one is just the top end of the G chord. As we move up, we're now just barring across major scale notes, so it's not going to clash at all with our G major. Just to quickly break that down in case you don't play the guitar and you don't know any scales, in G major that we're in here, the major chord, the second octave of it is like this. That's the first note that I was barring, but with my first finger, but if you follow it on, that was the second note that I was barring, and this is the major scale and I'm playing through. And it would continue if we wanted to get into the next octave on that 5th fret, that A that we've got here. So these notes, as I said, are all part of that major scale. So when you squash them down, they're not going to clash with the chord that we've been playing. Just for reference as well, these shapes are going to stay the same when we change chord, but obviously the position's going to change because the chord has changed. So with the G, we've got that. When we change to our C, exactly the same shapes, but just higher up the guitar, back to the G. And then with the D, we go back into the riff and it'll... And the whole thing will then repeat again. There is a little solo in here as well, but if you are approaching playing along with this, if you just see it as G minor pentatonic shape 1 that we've been through lots of times on this channel, just hammer on that second finger on the G string and it's going to make it relevant to the major chord. So that you can do so much with that. And I know that it's very B.B. King, just throwing that in there, but it is what the blues is all about, just mixing the major and the minor keys. I do want to get into a bit of the background behind Taj. I know that he was born Henry. Taj is his stage name after a dream he had about India and Gandhi and social intolerance as well. But his family were very musical. His mum used to sing in the gospel choir. His dad was a jazz arranger, also a piano player. As a family, they owned a shortwave radio. So it meant that as well as that jazz influence from his dad, Taj managed to listen to all kinds of music from all over the place, so many different genres. Ella Fitzgerald actually referred to Taj's dad as the genius, so he was very well thought of in the industry. Taj started playing classical piano and then moved on to clarinet, trombone, harmonica. I mentioned the guitar earlier as well. Tragically, his father died when he was only 11 years of age. When his dad was working as part of his construction company, a tractor flipped over and crushed him, and this must have been so difficult at that age to lose your dad. Taj then started playing the guitar. It was actually his stepfather's guitar because his mum remarried, and this would have been when he was 13 or 14 years of age. And at the age of 16, he also had a passion for farming, and he would get up at 4 a.m. and also started to study at university. That was his major, in animal husbandry. So it was very much between music and farming. Those were his two passions. He decided to go for the music rather than the farming and set up Taj Mahal and the Electras. In 1964 is when he moved to California. He would have been 22 years of age, and this is where he started up Rising Suns, and that was with Ry Cooder as well, who was in the band with him. They signed to Columbia Records, but unfortunately never released an album there. But at that time, Taj was working with a lot of very influential and well-known blues players, Howlin' Wolf, Buddy Guy, Muddy Waters, Lightning Hopkins. So he stayed at Columbia Records to pursue his solo career and released Taj Mahal in 1968. He also worked with the Rolling Stones and performed with them multiple times. In 1972, he was in and wrote the score for a film called Sounder. He also did the same for the sequel and ended up doing 12 albums with Columbia Records, and after that he signed with Warner Brothers Records and did 3 more albums with them. Moving into the 70s and early 80s as well, throughout the 70s disco was really taking off, so Taj struggled to get another record deal, and in the 80s as well, heavy metal was taking over, so it was a totally different mainstream sound that had been possible previously. So he moved to Hawaii and just started jamming, got a band together called the Hula Blues Band, and it was so successful and so popular that they did tour. And in the late 80s, this was 1988, is when he released Taj, and that was an album that was released through Gramavision, and he also recorded around that time with Hannibal Records as well. In the 1990s is when he became deeply involved with the non-profit organisation Music Maker Relief Foundation, and he's still heavily involved with that to this day. Also, musically, in the 1990s, he worked with the Private Music record label and recorded R&B, blues, pop, rock, lots of different genres for them, and also collaborated with Eric Clapton and Etta James. In 1997, he was nominated and won the Grammy for the Best Contemporary Blues Album, and that was for Senor Blues. In 1998, he performed on the Largo album, which featured a lot of other top musicians. In the year 2000, he recorded Shouting in Key that I mentioned earlier, that also won a Grammy. And in 2017, he released Taj Mo, which was a collaboration with Kebmo, who you can find here on the channel somewhere. Also, Bonnie Raitt was on there, Joe Walsh, and you can check those two out independently here on the channel somewhere as well if you want to. But it's great to have a look back at Taj here in 1968, belting out Everybody's Got to Change Sometime. Thank you guys so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!